Bostrom Ministries. Beginning January 2018, Bostrom Ministries engaged in a whole new assignment by entering the airwaves of the world. Don't miss Ken and Mary Bostrom Ministries live.
Back to our program. We're excited to have you with us today. One of my favorite things to do is to teach from the Old Testament. I don't like it when people say we don't need the Old Testament anymore, but the thing is, this is the seed bed. That Genesis is a seed bed for every single thing that happens throughout the entire Bible. You can find everything throughout the entire Bible will somehow connect back into there. And I always say if I was stuck on a desert island and I could only have one book, it would be the book of Genesis. The Passion Translation has just come out with the book of Genesis, and some of his nuggets and comments on there are precious. They're really good because he goes into the Hebraic root and tells the source of that. Because if you read it for face value, a lot of the things in the Bible have got Hebraic idioms. Now, to us, an idiom would be like if I would tell somebody from another country, well, go to the fork in the road. I'm at a fork in the road. Well, they're going to look for eating utensils laying out in the road. That's not what I'm talking about. A fork in the road means I have to make a choice which way to go, to the right or the left, this way or that way. And make it a decision. When you come to a fork in the road, that means you have to make a decision between two different things. And so that would be an idiom that our culture understands. But some of these aliens that are coming from other countries, they would not understand that. And the whole Bible is written by Jewish people. Not the whole Bible, but the majority of the Bible is written by Jewish people, and they use a lot of idioms. For instance, when Jesus said to Peter, before the cock crows 3 times, you will deny me. And deny me 3 times. And did you know that after they came back from Babylon and they rebuilt the walls, it was forbidden for any chickens or roosters to be inside the walls of the city of Jerusalem. So what was Jesus talking about? If you go back in the original, that word that they're using for cock could also mean man. And there was a temple crier that actually his job was to open the gates. He actually would sleep on top of the key underneath him, so he would be the keeper of the key for the temple. And when he opened up the gate, he would cry out for, his first cry would be for the priest to come and get the sacrifice, then the other priests to come and start the worship and so forth. There was 3 different types of priests that he would call forth. And that is when he said the cock crow. That meant the temple crier. And see, the people that transcribed it from the original, they don't always get it correct. And that's why I like to go back to a lot of the Hebraic and find out exactly what's happening. There's so many nuggets in the Hebraic. It just makes it so rich and so come alive. Well, we're at the tribe of Gad this time. Now, Gad, his name means a troop or fortune, which is really interesting. Let's get into this. Genesis 30, verse 9. When Leah, now remember Leah was the one that Jacob didn't love. He went in and slept with her in duty only. And so he loved Rachel. He liked to spend all his time with Rachel, but as a husband, he had to make the rounds with his wives, And so Leah, when she saw that she stopped bearing, remember she had the first 4 sons. She had Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Bim, 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 bim. They're probably like step stools, like one right after another every 9 months. And when she saw that she had stopped bearing, wasn't able to bear children, Rachel brought in her handmaiden, and they had let's see, Dan and Naphtali. And then all of a sudden Rachel said, well, if it works for her to have a handmaiden, I'm going to bring my handmaiden Zilpah. Now, the handmaidens were actually sisters, just like Leah and Rachel were sisters. But the only thing about the sisters of the handmaidens is they were servants. They never had a life of their own. All they could do was serve, take care of them. So they took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob and his wife. Wow, that's interesting. Zilpah did have no, she couldn't decide if she wanted to sleep with him or not. She was forced to do it. That's horrible. Zilpah, her maid, gave her to Jacob as wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah, remember, the mothers are the ones that name the babies, which is really interesting. If God doesn't tell you what to name them, the mother did. And Leah said, a troop comes. And she called his name Gad. This name also means a fortune, to attack, to overcome, to invade, or to gather together. Zilpah's name, Bilhah, we talked about her, what her name means, but Zilpah's name means drop, tear, closeness, intimacy, maybe also wet with myrrh. Wet with myrrh. That's interesting. Gad was the seventh son of Jacob, but he was the first son of Zilpah. It's interesting that she named him Gad, because Gad is not a Hebraic name. Gad is a Babylonian god. It's a Semitic god of fortune. Isn't that interesting? That here she is, one of the handmaidens, and Leah called him Gad. She called him the name of a Babylonian god of fortune. I thought that was really interesting. Rashi said Gad also means Mazel Tov, or good luck. The symbols here, are really interesting. 3/10, one larger and two smaller. Now, this was, have you ever heard the term gadabout? Gadabout, it comes from the tribe of Gad, because they were always, they just didn't want to ever settle down. They just lived in tents, and then they moved their tents, and they moved their tents, and they just couldn't get settled. Do you see people like that? They change their jobs, they change their wives, they change their location, and they're restless and they're wandering. And this was like the tribe. He was known as a pilgrim and a stranger because he never settled down in the promised land. In fact, when we come to it, you'll find out that he never did enter into the promised land. He went in there to fight, but not to live. The gemstone here is ligur, and it means a beautiful deep blue. When I'm talking about the gemstone, I'm talking about on the breastplate of the high priest. Each one of them would have one of the gemstones. Each one of them had a month. Now, this month of Elul comes before the fall feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and Tabernacles. And so you have the 40 days of Teshuvah, which is returning back to the Lord. These are the days of Elul. Now, the Elul is an acronym for I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. And this is the month that they say that the king comes into the field. You don't go to the king will come from his throne, and he will come to you. And when you're returning back to the Lord comes closer to you. And so it's just a blessing that Gad has that month. His strength was a gatekeeper, a protector. He had grace for the place that he was in. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord, the Word of God says. And he was a gatekeeper, a protector. His weaknesses is that he would never settle down. And he was his own worst enemy because he couldn't settle down. He couldn't put down roots. When you don't settle down, you can't put roots down. So he was just always restless, as in seeking amusement. Now here is Jacob's prophecy. Jacob 49:19. Gad, a troop, shall tramp upon him, and he shall triumph at last. You know, the word a troop is, the enemy is called a troop. So it's the same as Gad's name, which means Gad is his own worst enemy. Could Jacob be thinking of the time of his life when he was his own worst enemy, doing his own thing, strong-willed? Because I think Jacob saw a lot of himself and the mistakes that he made when he saw his son. You know, each one of us have a spirit, we have a soul, and we live in a body. We are a spirit. Our spirit will die when this earth suit stays here on earth and goes back to dust, to the ground. This spirit and the soul will go to heaven if you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Now, this is interesting. If you look at the symbol of come or coming in a Chinese language, that each tent is a character for a man. And here we have 3 tents. You have the big one, and then you have the 2 small ones. And so you have the 3 parts of a man. You have the spirit, you have the soul, and you have the body. Now the cross in Chinese is a character for completion, or the number 10. So as Gad comes to the cross, he will overcome his old nature. When you let your spirit man dominate, you will come into the perfect will of God, and you won't be so restless, and you won't be wandering all the time, because you're coming into the perfect will of God. And so as Gad comes to the cross, he will overcome his own nature. I love this. They're used, you know, Chinese language is one of the most ancient languages, and many of the Jewish people were scattered into the Chinese area, into the Asia, and they're scattered all over the world. But here they brought the tribe of Gad along with them. I thought that was interesting. The 3 tents, that a tent stood for a man. And so that word, again, is from come or coming. Moses' prophecy 400 years later, and he said, Gad, blessed is he who enlarges Gad. He speaks a special blessing over anyone that'll help Gad with his calling. There is a blessing to those that help Gad to enlarge, to get out of his own prison. You know, enlargement speaks of expansion, growth, larger volume to speak, or write in greater length to release from prison. And the second part of the verse speaks of his warlike nature. He dwells as a lion. Now here the lion here, remember the 3 different stages of lion that Judah had? He had all 3 stages, just like the Lion King had the 3 stages. Now this is the last stage. This is the mature. This is the king of the beasts. This is the one that has wisdom, this not fooling around anymore. When you come to this stage, Laboth, it's a mature, older, resting in confidence and in strength. What a word. Wouldn't you love to have somebody speak that over you? And he says it tears the arm and tears the arm. Now, he's like a bold lion that tears the arm. Now, what is the arm? The arm is what would have the sword. The arm is what would have the bow or the spear. And he tears the arm so it tears the sword out of the arm. Basically, what it means is he's going to disarm the enemy. He's going to, can you imagine, you know, some of the wars in Israel where it talks about the enemy seeing huge angels, huge myriads of angels back there. and they just drop all their weapons to the ground and they start running. Back up there in the Golden Heights area and up in the area of Dan, there's tanks, armor, all those things that are just laying there that the enemy left when they went away, when they ran from what they saw. The crown of the head, he goes after the king or the royalty. There's a root and there's a fruit. And a lot of people are after the fruit. They're after the little parts. But you know what? Gad says Gad goes to the royalty. He goes to the head. He goes to the king. Because if you take the king, the whole area is going to scatter. And if you just take one of the like a private or a sergeant or something, it's the army's going to keep going. But if you take the king, and that's what Gad did. This speaks the ministry of deliverance to the Gadites. The Gadites had a ministry of deliverance. They went to the strong power. They were trained to go after the ruling power. The ruling power. Now, we're not done with Moses' prophecy, because Moses had a lot to say about Gad. In the next verse, he provided the first part for himself. In the area that Gad chose, remember Gad, he liked to live in tents, but he was also a good farmer and a good shepherd. And the first part that he chose for himself was the area of Og, King Og, and the king of Sidon. The king of Og in Deuteronomy 30:11, it says Og's bed was 15 feet long and 6 feet wide. That's a big bed. That's a big giant that had to be on that bed. And that's what he chose, the area for himself that had once belonged to giants. And it's on the west side of the Jordan. He didn't even go into the promised land. He just provided the first part for himself. Moses saw that. And here, because the lawgiver's portion was reserved there, he came with the heads of the people. He administered the justice of the Lord, his judgments with Israel. Here again, Gad was very much used and gifted in legal matters. He was gifted as a scribe that would write out legal contracts. He was gifted in engraving and in printing. This is some of the things that he was very gifted, the calling of God upon his life. Now, the Lost Books was interesting. Now, the Lost Books, it's I don't have it along today, but Gwen Shaw is the one that got me into this. They're books that were found, during the time when Israel came back into the land, and they had the Dead Sea Scrolls from Qumran and stuff. There was a lot of things that were unearthed, and one of them was the Lost Books. It's the last words ever given by the 12 tribes to their son, and it was it was actually put into print back at the time of the Essenes in the 1st century. And here we said, it says, Gad, the 9th son. Well, he was really the 7th son. I don't know why they call him the 9th son. But the 9th son of Jacob and Zilpah, shepherd and strong man, but a murderer at heart. That was the intro. So here when we get into chapter 1, verse 24, here's what he is saying to his sons as he's on his deathbed. For a spirit of hatred worketh together with Satan, through hastiness of spirits, in all things to man's death, but the spirit of love worketh together with the law of God in long suffering unto the salvation of men. He is warning his sons, don't make the mistake I did. And then in the 2nd chapter, he goes on about this. He says, put away therefore jealousy from your heart, and love one another with the upright of heart. And so he's warning them, don't do what I did. Don't get into jealousy and hatred in your heart. you end up being a murderer. Now, it does not say, exactly what all this is about, but this is recorded by his sons as he was on his deathbed giving his last words. It's like the last word in testimony. The tribe of Gad made great soldiers in David's army. 1 Chronicles 12:8, some brave and experienced warriors from the tribe of Dan also defected to David while he was in the stronghold of the wilderness. They were experts in both shield and spear, as fierce as lions and as swift as deer on the mountain. Here's the lion like that Moses prophesied about. They were fierce. They were good warriors. Now here's one. I brought out one, Jephthah from Judges 11 through 12. Jephthah was born in Gilead. His name means set free. He was a judge in the 12th century BC. His father was Gilead, and because there is a Gilead and a tribe of Gad mentioned in 1 Chronicles 5:14, it is possible that they could even be from the same family. Jephthah's mother was a harlot. She was not a wife. His half-brothers and his father's lawful wife rejected him because they were afraid that he would share the inheritance. He fled to the land of Tob on the wilderness, and there became a leader of a band of robbers. Like David, he became skilled and daring fighter. Judges 11:1 says he was a mighty hunter. Well, the Ammonites came against Gilead, and the people asked him to come home. All of a sudden, they like this harlot's boy because we need him. He is a mighty warrior, and we need his help. And so he was bitter about the way they treated him, but they said, don't hate me and drive me out of my father's house. He says to those people, didn't you hate me and drive me out of my father's house? Why have you come and when you're in trouble? Then that's in Judges 11:7 from the Amplified Bible. But he goes to help them, and he marched south with a wide sweep and attacked the Ammonites from the rear. Israel still fights that way today and learned that from him. He won the victory. But he made a vow to God before he went into battle that he would sacrifice to the Lord whatever came out of the door of the house when he returned victoriously. To his horror, his only child, his only daughter, came to welcome him, singing and dancing and playing the tambourine. He tore his clothes in grief because he loved her dearly. But she encouraged him to keep the vow and her request. She is the first woman martyr in the Bible. Because she said, Daddy, if you made a vow to God, even if I have to die for it, keep the vow. Keep the vow. She became a martyr unto the Lord. And so they still honor her today with dancing. She asked to go and get away into the mountains to bewail her virginity for 2 months. It never says if she was actually sacrificed, but that was one of the Gadites. The Gadites, they were mighty warriors when God got a hold of them. Now here's the land portion. See down here on this side of the Jordan River, that's the area of Jordan today. And they chose, here's a tribe of Reuben, and they chose to have to not go into the promised land. Now they would go in and help fight in the promised land when the other brothers needed help, but they didn't want to live there. They wanted to live in the area. He wanted to live in the area of the giants. He did. He wanted the giants portion. And so Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, they were the first ones taken into captivity, the Word of God says, because they didn't live in the promised land where God had promised them protection. In the millennium, when they portion out the land, they're going to be the farthest south below Zebulun. And so, no matter what, these people all these tribes, God had a plan and a purpose for each one of them. He had gifts and callings for each one of them. He had land. He had a portion. You know, in the Quran, they don't mention Jerusalem one time. And really, the Quran really wasn't important. This land was not important. All of a sudden, in the last days, these lands are important. And so God has a plan and a purpose for every single one of us. He never makes junk. He never makes a mistake. He never makes something to be not used. Everything has a purpose, and He has a call of God in your life. God bless you. Bye-bye.
This is Ken and Mary Bostrom. We thank you for joining us today. We welcome you to watch us on kbntv.tv, YouTube, Facebook, mbostrom2.com. Also listen to us on WRNO Shortwave Radio. Contact us at kenbostromministries.org. God bless you today.
Ken Bostrom Ministries. www.kenbostromministries.org. Don't miss Ken and Mary Bostrom Ministries live. Contact them at 832-212-1138.